after the countdown. Hey guys, welcome to Monday Mindset Mojo. It's great to have you here again, and we got some great guests on the show today. I encourage you guys to join in the live chat. All you have to do is drop your comment in that chat bubble, and I'll bring it on screen. I know that our special guests would love to hear from you. I know I would, because today we're looking into what are the mental bandwidth struggles that you have? What are the belief loops that you struggle with? And how can you really sharpen the way that you think? We're going to be talking about cutting clutter and building clarity on today's Monday Mindset Mojo. And we're going to dismantle that myth that you got to feel better to function better. That's really just not true. We're going to focus on how disciplined cognition, editing those problematic beliefs, and what I would call attention integrity. Intention integrity leads to stronger decision making. And if your brain's overloaded, if you're just running bad code, we've got the solution for you today because we're bringing you Mike Machada. He is a Marine, he is a financial strategist, he's a founder. He reframes wealth building as thought discipline, not just a mindset exercise. The lovely Kira Yang is here. She's a high performance hypnotherapist, and she works to guide elite performers in how to edit those really deep subconscious scripts. And then also Kashi, she's a Web3 engineer. She was a guest last week on my Executive Espresso. I really enjoyed interviewing her, but she's a mental health advocate, and I love what she had to share that was real, that was genuine, that was down to earth as she explored her own belief systems to reboot some of this cognitive software that might have been sabotaging her like it does all of us. Guys, it's so great to see you here today. What a lovely bunch of people and friends out there. Be sure and invite some other friends. Share it in the DM groups that you're a part of on X or Facebook or LinkedIn. Share it out in the communities. But let me start out with Kira. Kira, to share with us a bit of your background and what you do out there on social media, the kind of work that you do, please.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me. And as you already mentioned, I am a master hypnotherapist. I work with high performers and millionaires in, reaching peak performance and overcoming burnout. And the biggest mission at, a certain level of success, it's always about more success, but there's a point in which there needs to be a rewiring of the mind because we're programmed for survival. And I'm sure we're going to talk about this today. But the edge that a lot of high performers think they need and are afraid to lose, right? The hypervigilance, the chronic overthinking, overanalyzing, don't want to miss out on anything. There's a point of diminishing returns because, as we're going to talk about, it eats up a lot of mental bandwidth, and we only have a very specific amount every single day, right? So once we can clear that space out, as you've already alluded to, we're going to have a lot more clarity, a lot more groundedness in making the decisions that are very high level, that are, for a lot of my clients costing hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars. Every decision is crucial, right? So if we can get you to a place that you are super clear, super calm, grounded, and you're actually, again, when we're out of survival, going to be taking in the greatest amount of data in our current environment, it's going to give you the most amount of control in order to get the greatest outcomes. So that's a little about me.
I love that. I love that. Guys, we're going to clear up your thinking as clear as that great background Kira's got back there. And your mind will be as clear as the clear blue sky. Mike, tell us about your background and a little bit about what you do. Oh, Mike, my friend, you're muted. I do that myself all the time.
Sorry, as you mentioned, I'm in financial planning, wealth management, and I'm also a former Marine. So what I do for my clients is I help them plan their financial lives. And part of that is building a disciplined strategy around how they're going to reach all of their goals in retirement. Or, if they want to retire early, they want to retire later, they never want to retire. Everybody's got different financial goals, and my job is just basically to help you realize those. A lot of people have some kind of limiting beliefs surrounding their financial goals, like, oh, I'll never be able to retire, or I didn't save very much when I was in my 20s and 30s, so how am I ever going to catch up? And so basically my job is to, take those feelings and then put numbers to them and say, hey, look, you can do this. This is how you can do it. And then build a strategy in order to get that done. So I think that a lot of people have these limiting beliefs. And so I like that we're talking about mindset, because I run into that all the time when I meet a new client, especially. And then the goal is that after working with them for a certain amount of time, they hopefully not get rid of those limiting beliefs, but they don't come up quite as much. And I do like that you talked about building systems, because I think those are important, especially when going through financial goals and your plan. If you go through those in a disciplined way where you're tackling, even if it's different kinds of problems, there's always a process to follow, that's good to run through for each different financial problem that you're tackling, whether it's selling the business, buying a house, funding college. The variables are all different, but the process is all the same. It's all time value of money, and it's all, what investments you use to reach those goals. So I'm excited to be here, and excited to hear of everybody else's input, because they come from backgrounds that aren't the same as mine, and sometimes I end up talking to a lot of people that were the panels all in the same group. So I like this setup.
Well, I love what you said about taking those goals and putting numbers to them, because one of the things that I did when I was my years as a surveyor, and I was talking with somebody about this the other day, that it's not enough just to identify a problem. You have to make the result measurable. So how do you know if you've achieved that result? So I love how you put that. And finally, but not least, Kashi, share with us your background, what you do on X, and I appreciate you being here today. Take it away.
Okay, good day, Dr. Hayes. Good day, everybody. Nice to be here with you all. I'm grateful to be here with you all. I don't know if I'm audible.
You sound great. Yes, thank you. Kashi couldn't be on video today. Sometimes in some countries the video drags down the feed a lot, and so that's why we have her lovely PFP on screen. But Kashi, you sound great. Go right ahead.
Okay. It's great to be here with you all. It's great to do this with you again, Dr. Hayes. Yeah, okay, I'm Kachi. I'm a Web3 and DeFi enthusiast. I'm still evolving and learning. I'm into the DeFi space, and I'm also a data scientist. I love to get insights from data rather than assuming, so I could get my facts straight. So coming across, I've been experiencing depression in some years back. I delved into the space of the mindset advocate, and I think the mindset is really a great aspect of our lives. And then having been able to declutter some things that held me back in years past, that's what drove me into the mindset space. And I'm glad to do this with you all.
Oh, it's good. It's good to hear you too. Now, Derek, welcome. I'm not sure what's going on. Derek says he can't hear Kashi. I can hear Kashi. Mike and Kira, she come through okay for you guys? Fantastic. Derek, my friend, I don't know, man. I hope that you can toggle something, but yeah, sometimes there are technological difficulties, and hopefully we'll get those worked out. My good friend Mojo couldn't be here today for some reason, so you'll see me adjusting the screen in the background. But, Derek says I can hear. It is a minor miracle. I'm glad to hear that. No pun intended. I'm glad to hear that Derek can hear. But today we're going to be talking about some of these things that Kachi brought up, because the thing I love about these discussions is making them human. And I've never met too many people that at some point in their life, they're going to go through some mental drudgery, and they're going to develop some form of depression, or they're going to struggle with anxiety. What a human thing, struggling with anxiety. And so I hope to leave you guys with some actionable takeaways so that you'll know how to direct and manage your mental bandwidth, because your brain really fires faster when you check the beliefs that tend to drag it down and cause a lot of lag. So we'll be talking about some belief loops and some mental debugging here. But let's talk about attention first. So you guys are pretty accomplished, and Kashi, she does a lot. What do you do to kind of maximize attention on the proper things? What do you do when there's a squirrel? One of my favorite movies, Up. What do you do when the squirrels start popping up? And Mike, you're a numbers guy, and so I would guess that you spend a great amount of time in front of the computer, maybe. And so, how do you manage attention?
Uh, Basically, the way that I've been managing attention for the last several years, I just become so busy that I go from task to task. So it's not really like that breaks up the monotony a little bit. I have 4 kids. I also have my primary wealth management business and working on 4 different startups. So I wouldn't recommend that as a way to, maintain focus and attention. But it's about the only way that I can do it now. It's like I have everything scheduled to fit in its own little box. And if I don't stick with that schedule, then it's not going to happen. So that tends to keep me pretty focused. But, I, like everybody else, I lose, there are times where it's hard for me to pay attention, and, I get up, get a cup of coffee, or, talk to one of my kids, talk to my wife, whatever, and, come back to the task.
Now, some of you may know that as the Pomodoro technique, and that is, and my mother-in-law say that again.
I have no idea what it's called, but that's
yeah. So the Pomodoro technique, and maybe Kira can talk a bit about it. But I remember being in undergrad school, and I'll tell you what I did, but it literally did not work. I would try to study for hours. I knew it was going to take me, say, 3 hours to read something that was assigned by the professor, and I'm going to barrel through. I'm going to drive through that. My mother-in-law said you should focus for maybe 40 to 45 minutes and take a 15 to 20-minute break. And this was 40 years ago. So the beauty of what Mike is talking about, guys, is that attending and focusing is just as much as knowing how to switch a task. Task switching is just as important as task focusing. Kira, tell us a bit, some of your thoughts on that.
I have like a million things to say about this topic because it's not just one thing, right? The biggest number one thing from a biology standpoint is sleep, right? If you don't get an adequate amount of sleep, it's really hard to focus because your body and mind are more primed to get overwhelmed. And so that's the number one thing. If you could fix anything, is that. In terms of like, oh, and one more other, biology related thing is that working with your chronographs. So we all have a chronograph where we're naturally at peak energy, and then other times we're in lower energy points. So for me, I know that right when I wake up, I am going to be the most productive. And at around 2 to 4 p.m., I'm in my trough. And when you try and do work during that time, it's like really uphill. And, I know we all experience that dip, right? And that's when you should probably go do some active recovery, go work out, go for a walk, whatever it might be. And I know we don't all have that luxury, but really working in that time, you're just draining a lot of, neurochemistry like dopamine, norepinephrine, all the things that we need for focus. And we're just draining it on times that are very unproductive for us naturally, right? So that's another thing. But from a strategic standpoint, really, really important is separating the planning from execution. So when we can, say the day before, that's always my recommendation. In the next day for whatever our blocks are, I recommend 60 to 90-minute blocks. Flow states are a big thing too, which is, again, another conversation where our brain are closer to theta and alpha waves, where we're more creative. Everything is like, you're totally locked in the zone. Your problem solving is like through the roof. But again, to get into those zones, the biology has to be right. And so when we're looking at the strategy of separating planning from execution, we want to plan ahead, because if we're trying to make decisions, which, decision fatigue, I'm sure you're going to bring that up at some point, right? We have a huge cognitive load, the allostatic load builds. We can't really focus because we're trying to think of what we're going to do. And then, if again, the challenge is too big, right? There's a challenge skills balance and all this. Like if it's too big, then we get overwhelmed or we'll procrastinate. And then we're trying to execute, and there's this kind of like, again, context switching, which again drains our ability to focus. So if we're able to plan ahead and then just move into execution, which again builds a lot of dopamine, just like, checking off the box, that builds a lot of upward momentum in building a lot of focus and productivity for us, right? So that's one of the major things that I do, because when we execute, we're not trying to decide in the moment. We're just like, okay, well, let's follow this like really thought out plan. And it doesn't have to be perfect for my perfectionists out there. I know there are many of you probably listening to a degree, high performers. But yeah, those are some like, strategies that I would work with.
Well, talk about high performers, Kira. What do you find people let get in the way of what you just said? Because I know that we've got some folks listening thinking, yeah, but that's Kira. Kira can do this. I can't do this. What do you think? Especially high performers, what do you think they let get in the way of what you're talking about?
Yes. So there's a couple of things when we're thinking about like the CEOs I work with. Many of them have built 7, 8, even 9-figure companies. They're very A-type, and they think that rest is like weakness, right? And again, that's like actually a subconscious limiting belief. And so they think, oh, if I rest or slow down, I'm falling behind, or everything's going to fall apart, or I'm going to miss something, and my company's going to go on fire. And that just simply isn't true. So there's a couple limiting beliefs in there where, it's not just about, I'll be a failure, but it's deeper. It's a self-worth belief that actually drives them to burnout. And again, when we're burnt out, we're not able to restore all those neurochemicals, like we mentioned, like the dopamine, the norepinephrine, that are required for focus, for clarity, for high-level decision making, right? We're more prone to being exhausted, overwhelmed, and burnt out. And when we're in that state, it's like trying to operate like at a maximum capacity when your battery's only filled to like 50%. And you're constantly like fighting this reactive battle, right? So one is a mindset, as we know, like Mike mentioned, like most of the problems are actually mindset. Everyone kind of knows what to do, but like, why aren't you doing those things? There's a subconscious limiting belief. So that's one side. And then the other side is that they have normalized so much that like, it's like glorified, right? Like we should be like grinding 17 hours a day. And I'm not saying that you don't have to do that, but we also need to like have active recovery. Like some of my clients, they do need to work a lot, right? And that's just the reality, right? But we also need to put in structured recovery, even if it's like 5 minutes of breath work or meditation or foam rolling or whatever it might be between meetings. It's like if you were to charge your phone I know it's not good for lithium batteries, but for the sake of this analogy, if we were to like, charge our phone every 10 minutes, we would last much longer throughout the day versus like just draining it all the way from the top. And we're only starting at 60%. We're going to run out of steam a lot faster, right? And so it's the same type of idea. But that's one of the biggest mental blocks for a lot of high performers, where they think slowing down is failure and it's weakness. But then they only push themselves so far where they're only operating at partial capacity, which actually is the real weakness. Like you're not operating at full potential. So it's a trade-off, but it's a big limiting belief for sure.
Well, Mike, how do you tackle this? Oh, Mike, you're muted again, my friend.
How do I tackle what specifically?
Yeah, how do you tackle this drive to just go, and just grind, and just wear yourself out? Stephen Covey comes to mind. Stephen Covey talked about an abundance mindset and a scarcity mindset, and that there's never enough time. You can never do enough work. You can, it's just go, like Kira talked about. And people, they just, at a certain point, it's just not sustainable. I screwed something up there. It's just not sustainable. Yeah, talk about multitasking. I'm sitting there talking, multitasking, trying to fix the screen here. And I'll make a point on that real quick is the brain really doesn't multitask, it time shares. Your brain time shares. And so when you're doing one thing and then you load one thing on top of it, then performance is going to suffer. We could do an experiment here. I can give you guys some letters. See how many letters, audience, members of the audience, guests, see how many letters you can remember. Okay, here they go. ESUOHTLA. All right, repeat those letters back. That is 8 letters. How many of the 8 letters? Now, your performance dropped off around letter number 7. The brain has a buffer, a pattern buffer, where it can hold in about 7 chunks of information. Now, there's some tricks you can do, like you can chunk information together, ESOU, and then HTLA. But even that, there is a limit. The problem is knowing how to chunk things properly and knowing what your capacity is. And most human brains, roughly, and this is where the bell curve comes in, most human brains on the bell curve are going to be right about the middle, plus or minus 1 standard deviation either way. And so just the drive. There's only so much you can fill a cup with. So, Mike, how do you know when your cup is getting, too full and running over and you need to take a break?
That one's kind of hard for me because, as I started off my professional career right before that, I was in the Marine Corps. So I applied that same sort of mentality to the corporate world, which doesn't really work very well. I wasn't at war, even though sometimes I treated it like it. So that actually does lead to, burnout type things. You end up working too much. And what I'll just say is I started to realize where I was working so much that I was starting to hit that point. And then I try to slow things down when I feel like that's happening. I'll switch tasks, like I said before. I'll, talk to a friend or, my wife or one of my kids or go do something else. But if you're especially owning your own business, you're going to run into that. It's going to happen because there are certain deadlines that you just can't change. And so you're going to have to work through it to meet that deadline or, talk to whoever has the deadline and see if it can be switched or just switch tasks if you're feeling, overwhelmed. But there's not a lot of room for error sometimes. So you have to, sort of tackle it in a different mentality, not like the world's going to end if you don't finish it, but let's finish this. You have to, just be calm, cool, and collected while you do it. There's a saying in the Marine Corps, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And basically, like when you're in a really like high stress environment, you want to make sure that even if you're getting shot at and you're, running somewhere, you want to be able to think clearly so that you don't run to the wrong building and then die on your way. So sometimes, slowing down your thought process can sometimes help you actually operate more quickly. And actually my oldest son runs into this a little bit. He's 12 years old. He's very bright. He's already doing calculus. He can solve any Rubik's Cube. So he has a little bit of a, high octane, fast moving brain problem. And I know people are thinking, well, why is that a problem? Well, the problem is that sometimes when he goes to communicate, he's thinking about 200 words and you can't fit that many in 20 seconds. So his problem is that he has to slow down a little bit so that his message gets across more clearly. And I would say that it's the same thing in your task management and process management to make sure that you're not trying to do a million things at once, like you said. and just narrow it down to simpler tasks so that it's more digestible, so that you can do it in succession, in order, rather than trying to do everything all at once, because no one can really do that. One thing that I really do like that's available now that wasn't available when I was younger is using any of the AI tools. So I have Claude, I have ChatGPT, I have Grok, and I use all of those interchangeably depending on which task I'm looking at. I'll use Gemini every once in a while too, but they're really good for setting up an outline for yourself to say, okay, well, this is my problem, and this is what I want to accomplish. What's an outline I can use to accomplish those tasks? This is the amount of time I have to spend, and then break it up into different micro tasks that are more digestible, that you can complete in order, in a disciplined way. And that's a tool that really wasn't available until very recently. So I would suggest, if you don't use AI already, I would suggest starting with that kind of prompting. Build task completion outlines for yourself in different areas of life, and I think that's really helpful. Like, I'm probably going to go to ChatGPT and ask about hypnotherapy and how it can be used, and accomplishing my goals. Because it's not something you run across all the time, but it is interesting. I've always wanted to learn more about it. So I'm glad Kira's on here, but I'm going to learn a little bit more later to see what's involved.
It can be a game changer. I got board certified in clinical hypnotherapy in 97, 98, something like that, and used it all the time. So yeah, great resource. Here's the thing, and by the way, I think this kind of fits in. I do mental health every day, behavioral health, whatever you want to call it, and I've done private practice for a bit over 30 years, been in the mental health field for 4 decades, by the way. Seems like a long time. But most of what gets diagnosed as ADHD is not a pathology, but a task chunking problem. And so let's go back to your son. Tell your son, by the way, that I do the same thing. And I did it first thing this morning, guys, with these wonderful people on screen today, is I was trying to explain how the show was going to go. I was saying we're going to start at this screen and then go to this screen and do this and do that. And as my dad would say, and your son may love this, I was trying to talk so fast, I got my tongue wrapped around my eye teeth, and I couldn't see a word I was saying. You get it there, tongue wrapped around my eye teeth, couldn't see a word I was saying. And so I did exactly what Mike talked about. I simply slowed down the process, because the more you focus in on a process properly, the better the brain gets at that process. But you can't go fast at it, because it hasn't learned the process. Once you learn the process, then you get really, really, really fast at it. You guys can Google one of my favorite guys. He's just was an amazing man with, he would have been the Billy the Kid of the day back in the Old West. He could have outdrawn any Old West gunfighter. And his name was Bob Munden. He could draw his pistol and hit 3 targets. He would use 3 fingers to pull the trigger, pop, 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 and he could do it all in under a second. And he was so fast you couldn't even hardly see his hand move. Now, how did he do that? He certainly didn't start out at that speed. He started out very, very slowly. And then once his brain learned the pattern, he could go faster. So I love what you said about breaking things down into small tasks, because that's exactly what you could do and exactly what you should do, because you can master a chunk at a time. The big thing that people get wrong with ADHD, by the way, is what's really going on in the brain is they're trying to eat the whole elephant. and you can't swallow a whole elephant. Not that you should eat elephants, by the way, but when you break down the elephant into small bites, then you have something digestible on your plate. And I find that so many people look at things and it's just too big. They just can't tackle it. And Kasha, I'd like to go to you momentarily because I heard some of this in our interview last Friday at how you organized your mindset to be successful. And in order to do that, there's some things you chose to focus on and some things you decided not to focus on. So, Kashi, what are some ways that you kind of managed your mindset to focus on some things and not others? If you would share with us, please. What do you think? Kashi, you're muted, my dear.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Heath.
Oh, thank you.
I got on mute. Okay, I think for me, I've not been able to work. I just finished college. I've not been able to work with a team, but trying to learn, trying to evolve. I think what I've learned, being able to manage focus is one. I think is awareness. I really need to understand what is focus and what is that particular thing that deals with focus. For me, I think what really dealt with my focus is aimless 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 scrolling. At some point, I'm always on social media, trying to scroll, trying to be update on what's happening online, and I think at some point it ate up my mindset unknowingly, subconsciously. So coming back to my Web3 and DeFi space. The DeFi space is a very large space where we are building on the blockchain, trying to bring things on the blockchain and with different protocols. There will be so much information overload, and how I've been able to manage my focus in that space is doing one thing at a time. I think Mr. Mike talked about that. Doing one thing at a time, being able to break down the tasks. Okay, what do I need to do at this point? Just start from where I am, forgetting the end goal, starting from where I am. What do I need to do now? What are the steps I need to take now to take me to that end goal of what I need? So I started out by just taking it a step at a time, doing the little I can do. That's how I've been able to manage my focus.
I love that. I love that. Fantastic. And I'd like to go back to Mike for a moment because I had a question about your time with the Marines that almost slipped my attention. So when you guys were out there and you ran into a really, really tough obstacle, how did you re-engineer your mindset when you thought that you couldn't take another step? What did you tell yourself? How did you get through that barrier of, man, I just can't take anymore? What do you do with that?
Yeah, so luckily, I think that gets dealt with pretty quickly when you're, going through your initial training in boot camp, because I felt like that many times in boot camp. You go through this exercise called the Crucible at the end of boot camp. It's a 54 hours or something like that. But basically, you hike 50 miles. Maybe it's less than 50 hours. I don't know, but it's 54 miles. You also do crawling exercises in between. You're like crawling through concertina wire. You've got like speakers going with that sounds like you're getting shot at, and they do actually shoot some blanks and then some live rounds overhead, just so you get an opportunity to feel like what that feels like in a non-combat situation. And then you're tired. You sleep, I don't know, 6 hours or something. I got to sleep less because I got bit by a spider a few days before, and so and the infection started. So it turned into cellulitis. Had to go to the hospital. Got back, did the Crucible a couple days later, and so every night they were having to stuff gauze into my calf where the infection happened, and then yank it out and to put new gauze in. Super painful, but as a result, we got 2 or 3 hours of sleep anyway, and I lost an hour every night because of that, because they had to keep changing the bandage. So during that process, you pretty much get over the I can't do this thing. Because you always reach a point, especially when it comes to the running and the physical training, or even going on, we call them humps, but they're hikes. And you go through that process, you're gonna run into the feeling that you can't do something, and then you realize you can. And at the beginning of boot camp, they bring in someone who's about to graduate, or they bring in a group that's about to graduate, and they go through, the things that you learn with, whether it's like marching, knowledge, physical conditioning, and they seem so polished by that point. They're like, I don't think that I'm going to look like that in 13 weeks. But you end up looking like that, and you end up being able to do exactly what they were doing. And the reason is because during boot camp, you go through these a lot of miniature exercises, and you get pushed kind of to your limit, and it's done in a way that's meant to mentally break you down and build you back up. And so by the time you're overseas, if you're getting the feeling that you can't do something, that's probably not a good thing, because you should have dealt with that a long time ago. But I will say there are some situations where you would feel like that, because you're going on convoys for days on end, or humping through a neighborhood. But the I can't do this kind of goes out the window when it comes to your own life and the people's lives next to you. It's just like giving up's not an option. So in business, the way that gets applied sometimes by people who are veterans, is that they just tend to apply that same sort of attitude with every single thing they do, which for me, I found out was a mistake, because you end up expecting this level of perfection in everything you do that makes you disappointed in the end, because you can't do everything with that kind of focus and zeal, and also be a dad and a husband, and all the other hats you got to wear in life. But overseas, one of the times that I ran into that was more stressful than some of the other times. My vehicle got hit by an improvised explosive device, and when it did, we were on our way to Fallujah from Camp Takadam, and so it hit my vehicle from the right side. Was activated by a cell phone. It was 6 88mm mortar shells that were wrapped together. They used a cell phone to activate it. Most of it hit the steel plate on our vehicle. The guy who was in the gun at the time, it was actually supposed to be me. So I was supposed to be on the gun, and he happened to be out of the gun because he was getting something out of his pack, and because he was out, there was a large chunk of metal that went through the gun turret from the floorboards and went straight through it. I mean, it was whoever was in there would have died instantly, easily. He did get a piece of shrapnel that went through his eye socket, got lodged in his cheekbone. He had another piece of shrapnel that went through his foot. He had a hole about that big around in his heel. Lost a third of the bone in his foot. And for me, I just had a little bit of shrapnel in my jaw, and my face looked kind of messed up. But I didn't even realize I was hurt at first, actually. I just felt like I got punched in the face. I guess adrenaline, you don't really feel it. And so what I was going to say is, in those types of events, I think you're more thinking survival mode. It's more like, there's no option to not get through it, because you have to get through it, right? So then, for me, it happened really fast. So helicopter came in. I brought him over the helicopter with 2 other guys, and at this point I still didn't even realize I was hurt at all. And so dropping off the helicopter, one of the crewmen who was a medic, he looked at him, and they were going to take him to I think Baghdad. Yeah, so he went to Baghdad first. And he was like, "Are you coming too?" And I was like, "Why would I go? What do you need me for? Like, you guys are the medical professionals." So anyways, I went back to the convoy. The convoy commander showed me a mirror and was like, "Are you sure you're okay?" And then so later I went to our corpsman, and they took out some of the shrapnel. I had a little piece in my forehead, and I finished the convoy, but slept for a couple of days, and then went back out on the road a couple of days later. And I actually didn't even know I had shrapnel in my jaw until I got home. And it was probably years later, because I went to the dentist, and I had told him, kind of the story. And he was like, "Did you ever have cavities as a child?" And I was like, "No." So he was like, "Yeah, it doesn't really look like a filling, but you have metal in your jaw." And it was on the right side. And I was like, "Oh, okay, well, that kind of makes sense." Because the next day my jaw was really swollen. Like it looked, this part of my jaw was out to like right here.
Wow.
Like it was very swollen. But anyways, we would go on convoys for, that would last for a long time, and sometimes back to back. During Phantom Fury, which was in December of 2004, there were times, I think I went one time like 48 hours without even sleeping. So
wow.
My problem is actually what it was Kira talking about this, I believe, with sleep. Thinking I don't need sleep, and makes me weak to sleep a normal amount. That's the problem that I have sometimes, because I know I can, if I really need to, stay up for that long and function, but it's not, it's not an ideal situation. It's definitely not functioning at the highest level possible. But I can still do pretty good. But
well, that's a great point. I have a question that I stole from Stephen Covey. Imagine stopping at the gas station and saying, "Gosh, it is so weak to have to pull over and put fuel in my tank. Man, look at all these other guys. None of these guys are stopping. What a weak guy I must be to have to stop and put some fuel in my tank." And so, guys, that's where sleep is. That's where sleep is. Such important topics or points you made there, Mike. I appreciate that. One of the things I love that I heard you say was about if you're in a combat zone and you're not ready, basically, that's the wrong time to not be ready. And so a point I like to make there, guys, is you're going to run into resistance. And I'd like to get in the next about 8 minutes. We've got to wrap up about 8 minutes. Our guests have to go today. They've got some appointments. I know Kira does, and I appreciate you guys so much being on. But don't wait for a fire to purchase a fire extinguisher or learn how to use it. Don't wait until you find yourself in your business in the combat zone, because once you're in combat, it's too late to learn how to do combat. Train yourself in preparation of the inevitable happening. And what are you going to do when you lose focus? What are you going to do when you look at your life, look at your business, and you think, "Oh, I just can't take another step"? What are you going to do? What are you going to tell yourself? What is the executable code? What is the executable code that you're going to run? And I think this is where hypnotherapy can come in. Mindfulness can come in. There's cognitive reprogramming comes in. Kara, what do you teach people to do? What recommendations might you have?
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know I have till 1:15, so I have a little bit more time. So
Oh,
we
okay,
can definitely stay
fantastic.
on the chat. Yeah. So, I wanted to touch base on, what Mike mentioned, because it's really important that, of course, during those times when you need to survive, like we survive, right? Like we just have absolutely no other option but to go through and make it happen. The issue is that, for a lot of high performers, as children, we're trained to survive because when we're young, we're highly programmable from the ages of 0 to 7. We're basically like these unconscious sponges absorbing everything in our world, right? About religion, society, politics, money, love, relationships. And what we learn is that, when we're a good child, and when we get straight A's and when we get gold, like we're celebrated, we're loved. And as children, we need love to feel safe, right? Because we're like, oh, somebody's going to take care of me. I'm being seen. I'm being heard. I'm asking for things and it's being delivered. But we also learn very quickly in our society that, if you don't do those things, you're criticized, you're judged, you're bullied, you're compared. And that's where we start to build our survival mindset, right? Where we're like, okay, I have to be this way, I have to have this type of success, I have to appear this type of way, I have to act this type of way in order to be loved and accepted. And, deep down, that's actually all we want. I think, we think it's about the private jets and the $1 million in the bank, but we really just want to be accepted and loved, right? We want to feel safe just being in our bodies. But, if we're outside of that, then I won't have that. And so that's where the perfectionism starts to come from. That's where our fears of unworthiness, our fears of failure, our fears of making mistakes, which is what manifests, in adulthood as overthinking, indecision, this feeling of survival where if I stop, everything will fall apart. But the truth of the reality is that, even for the clients that I work with that are multimillionaires, like they're not actually surviving anymore, but they're running outdated code. Right? Which is why they're stuck in this loop, even though their outward reality is like fantastic, right? And yes, of course, we have more, as humans, we're always going to have an evolution of more goals and, more and more and more. But it's also that understanding. It's like kind of that curse of competence where like we feel that anything outside of perfection is unacceptable. It's failure. This is why a lot of high performers struggle to even celebrate wins, because to them, it's the bare minimum. And they're no longer able to enjoy it. And then, the hedonic treadmill, right? And so anyways, I kind of went on a tangent there. But, one of the biggest things is to build a level of mindset that you're talking about, whether you call it resilience or you call it clarity or just like mental strength, right? We have to be able to reprogram our brains out of survival, because the litmus test for a lot of my clients that I'm like, okay, we're reprogrammed to the point where we can be at that peak potential, is that how quickly can you get back to baseline, right? When something goes wrong, when, you get triggered, whatever it might be. Yes, feel the fear. You need to feel fear. You need to assess risk. You need to be prepared, right? Anxiety is good to a degree, but how quickly can you actually process the data that's coming in, process those emotions, and then get to the other side where you're like, oh, okay, I'm back to clarity again. Because then we're going to be in that best position to gather the most amount of data about our environment. Because again, we're clear, if most of our capacity is focusing on all the things that can go wrong and the overwhelm and the overthinking and oh no, we have very little space to actually think from that higher place that's going to get us to that next level. And so when we reprogram a lot of those limiting beliefs that keep us stuck in those, I would say, self-sabotaging patterns, overthinking, anxiety, stress, so on, we're able to get back to baseline sooner, which then allows us to make the most, I hate this word sometimes, it's kind of cheesy, but the most empowered choice, because we're the most clear and we're the most present to our actual active reality versus like reacting to our past, right? Thinking the worst is going to occur. Because that's what creates those patterns of behaviors that keep us feeling kind of stuck or frustrated with our progress, even though we're successful. There's kind of this like resistance that's happening where we know we're not at our maximum potential. And that's what creates that mental drag, right? Where we're kind of like not building the momentum that we could because we're getting caught up in all of this survival mindset. So one of the biggest things is, really reprogramming like how to feel safe, as like simple as that seems. Because if we are feeling safe, regardless of the outward challenge, because life is always challenging. It doesn't matter what area of life, there's always going to be challenges. And if your brain is wired to survival, it's going to focus on all the ways that, we're going to have to survive. But if it's wired in the other direction, where it's like, all right, where are the opportunities? Like, right, the abundance, the, that's where people get more lucky. That's where people take more risks. That's where people excel in life, where they're they're like, yes, I can see this fear, I can assess this fear, I can process it, but let me make that purview not 90% of my mind. It's going to go down to 20 or 10, the accurate amount. So then I could refocus all of my energy, my mindset, right? Because our success is, yes, it's strategy, right? But it's also what is our mental clarity and what is that energetic capacity? Like what, if we feel good, we have more energy. When we have more energy, we have more ability to execute. Our execution creates our reality, right? So energy management is essential, and that comes down to a downstream of our mindset and our beliefs, right? So editing those beliefs it's essential, especially if you want to create a level of success where and again, it's all nuance. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but just like less resistance with yourself, right? Because that's all it is.
I love that. I love that. And I don't know if you guys noticed it, but Kara kept on toggling between fight or flight and more of a growth mindset. I found that it's really, really hard to build when you're in the state of fight or flight. You're really doing one or the other. You're either building or you're fighting or you're building. And I don't, it's not that fight or flight is bad. Fight or flight is a normal, naturally human process. It has its place, it has its purpose, but I think that sometimes this is what gets in the way of entrepreneurs and innovators is you're fighting to get your company off the ground, but once you get it off the ground, it's time to build. I find that people, new parents with 4 kids like my Cash, you're fighting to get things going, but then we need to show our families, hey, there's a time to build. Like the Good Book says, I'm a believer by the way, but like the Good Book says, there is a time for everything under the heavens. And one of those things is to take stock, take a breath, and ask, gosh, where can I polish? Where can I build? There's a time for fight or flight, but like Hannibal, I love reading about history. At some point, Hannibal just got old and tired. He just spent his whole life fighting Rome. And some of you out there know what I'm talking about, that you spent your whole life in fight or flight mode. Mike in the Marines, once a Marine, always a Marine. He's still a Marine, but he's not fighting that battle anymore. He's building his family. He's building his business. Kira building her business. Kashi, if you haven't listened to the interview I did with Kashi, go back and listen to that Executive Espresso. It's just, I think we went a little bit longer. It's usually about 18 minutes. But she's building her business. She finally decided, gosh, I'm not in a war zone. It's time to build. Well, we're about to wrap up here, guys, and I appreciate you being here. We're here every Monday morning at 7 a.m. Central Standard Time. That's U.S. Memphis time. In about 4 hours, we're going to do a live audio space on X. That's what it's called in audio. It's called a space. And that's on Midday Mindset. That's only about 60 minutes. But in 4 hours, 12 o'clock Central Standard Time, Memphis, we'll be doing that. You notice down in the right-hand side of your screen, I believe it is, the Mindset Masterclass. I would love to have you guys join. Just go to the link in my X profile, but it is school.com/mindset, school.com/mindset. That is SKOOL.com/mindset. Love to see you over there. Free lifetime memberships going right now, so take advantage of that. I want to wrap up with some final words from our guest. Kachi, I think we lost Kachi, so let me see. Maybe she'll make it back. But kind of as a wrap up, what are some down-to-earth, I call it shoe leather psychology, psychology that you can walk around in. Let me go to Mike. Some final tips for our guest to get out there and to reset, reprogram their mindsets. What might you recommend, Mike? And then we'll wrap it up with Kira. Mike, what do you say?
Reset, reprogram in terms of from a financial.
Yeah, just something to kind of get them going this week.
Just in general.
Yes, just in general.
In general, okay. All right. So as far as resetting, I think it's really important to take stock of where you are in life. Everybody's, in a different place. You might be really close to where you want to be, and you might be really far. But there's always someone in a worse situation. That's something you run into, especially if you've deployed before. I remember thinking all the time when I was in Iraq, thank God I didn't grow up here, because it's probably a very different experience than what any of us had in the United States. At least if you are in the United States, I know not all the viewers are, but there are definitely people in worse situations than yours, and it's always good to look back and appreciate what you have, and be thankful for that, and then just build steps to get to wherever you want to get to. And not everyone can do everything, but if you have a dream and it's somewhat achievable, there's nothing really stopping you from doing it except for you. So it's basically you just have to build the steps. You got to do it. If you get knocked down, get back up again, try again, try it from a different angle, and you can get it done. So resetting, mental state can be kind of hard when you've recently had a big failure or something, but you just have to get up and keep trying. And I've definitely failed at many things in my life. I've had some successes. I have, that problem that I think it was Kira talked about, where you don't really celebrate your success very much, or maybe it was Dr. Heath. I don't know which one of you said that, but I think the important thing with resetting is just making sure that you are cognizant of where you are, where you want to get to, and then visualizing the steps to get there. And if you try hard enough, you do it long enough, it'll happen eventually. So you just have to have that mindset.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Yeah, thank you so much. And on that point, it's okay to pat yourself on the back. You need a cheering section. So go out there this week and build a cheering section. I keep a folder on X. You guys on X, in case you don't know, you can keep a folder to bookmark of bookmarks. I have a folder called Kudos, Kudos. And when someone says something nice, supportive on X, I just bookmark it, because I go back and I read that stuff. It's okay to have a cheering section, and it's okay to be in your own cheering section. And so, Mike, thank you so much. And Kira, wrapping it up, thank you guys again so much for being here. Kira, some kind of actionable steps you would recommend folks can take this week to recode their mindset?
Yes, I have like 3 very quick things. So the first thing is when you feel that negative self-talk come up, because we're usually saying something, bad to ourselves, like you're a failure, you're lazy, or whatever it might be. The first thing is you want to ask yourself, like, who says, right? And typically it'll be, and trust the first thing that comes to mind. Usually it's mom, dad, something like that. And even if you say it's me, you ask yourself, where did you learn that? Because one of the most important things when we are starting to reprogram our minds is understanding that those ideas were never ours, right? It's something that we adopted. And so we want to create separation from that belief from ourselves. And that's one big part of starting the reprogramming process. The second thing we want to look at is also when you have that little voice, say it out loud, right? Because the reason we are feeling bad is we've been playing this broken record on repeat unconsciously. And the way that it's probably happening in our brain is, hearing your dad's voice saying like, you'll never amount to anything, or, you're such a loser. Like, how are you like resting right now? You should be working. We're being really mean to ourselves, right? And so one way to quickly change state, because that will spiral into negativity very quickly, and we're feeling stuck and hard on ourselves. Say it out loud in like a very cartoon, funny voice, like, you'll never amount to anything. Oh my God, you'll never amount to anything. You're never gonna amount. And say it about 12 times. The 13th time you say it out loud, you're going to be like, it feels funny, right? Because it's not about it being true. It's how we're talking to ourselves. And that's like an instant state change. The third thing I will say is that if we are ever caught in a mental spiral, one of the quickest ways to get out is that because our brains stop at the catastrophe, right? It's like, oh, that conflict resolution, like that conversation is going to go poorly. My shareholder's going to be mad at me, or that employee's going to like create a PR nightmare, or if I make that wrong decision, we'll lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like you're catastrophizing, right? At the worst case scenario. You want to really ask yourself, like, go one step further, right? Because our brains have stopped at a dead end where like it's the end of the world. So go one step further. That'll tell you, okay, so what happens then? Okay, it sucks. Okay, then what happens then? You'll be fine, right? So we want to just loop back to that point of like getting back to safety, because like you will be fine. You're just going to take another step, right? But our brain stops at it's a dead end. And that's why we get stuck in those loops, right? So get yourself 2-3 steps further, getting back to like, okay, well, we'll get to the point of where it sucks. You know, we deal with it and then we're going to be fine. And then we just move on with our lives. So we want to close that loop.
I love that because, see, we all have those loops. I think they run at an unconscious level. We don't know that we're there. But yes, Kira's right. We have, adopted those beliefs from hearing what other people say. But realize, guys, that's where your power is. It's kind of like a buffet, a mindset buffet. Just because mom or dad or neighbor or, I don't know, boss, commanding officer, critic, especially a social media critic or a troll on some social media, cooks you up a buffet and puts it on the menu, doesn't mean that you have to leave it on the menu. You get to choose what is on the menu of your mindset. And I so much appreciate you guys for being here. I'm going to put up the link for my Mindset Masterclass, guys, and be sure and go over and join me there. We do a deeper dive into this information every single day, and there's special content there just for the members. Mike, Kachi, Kira, y'all are so wonderful. Thank you for being here. I think Kachi wasn't able to join back up, some connection difficulties. But guys, thank you so much. Be back next week. We'll do this again. We have over 300 viewers on X now. We have many more viewers on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And of course, we have all the members in Mindset Masterclass. But thank you folks for watching. Be sure to do what my friend Derek at Willing Witness says. Interrogate your beliefs. Interrogate your beliefs. And if they're not working for you, it's time to do some reprogramming. We'll catch you next time. Bye-bye now.